I found the papers before she even said a word, neatly stacked on the kitchen table, right between my coffee mug and the half-sliced avocado she knew I hated. That was Rebecca's style, precision with a hint of passive aggression. She walked in still drying her hands on a dish towel, didn't even look up when she said it. I want a divorce. Not, we need to talk. Not, I've been unhappy. Just that. Like she was canceling a subscription. I took a long sip from my mug, stared at the papers like they were the morning crossword, and said, without blinking, "That sounds good, Rebecca." No sarcasm. Just warm, soft, like I was agreeing to lunch plans. I didn't even flinch. I think that's when she started to panic, though she covered it like a pro. She raised an eyebrow, probably expecting the usual: denial, bargaining, maybe a grand speech about soulmates and therapy. Instead, I handed her the pen. Should I sign all pages or just the bottom one? That's when she finally looked up. Her lips parted just slightly. Confused. Disoriented. Like someone hit the brakes in her fantasy. "You're not even going to ask why?" I leaned back in my chair. Nope. Truth is, I already knew. Not the details yet, but the rhythm was off. For months, I'd felt the hum of something rotten beneath our quiet routines. The perfume that wasn't hers. The credit card charge at the hotel that didn't match her itinerary. The unfamiliar cologne buried deep in the laundry bin behind her yoga pants. Tiny things, easy to miss. But I don't miss things. I collect them. So no, I didn't ask why. I signed page after page with the same steady hand I used to balance our budget. When I was done, I closed the folder and pushed it back to her like I was done with a menu. She stood there a moment longer, disarmed, then forced a nod. "Well, okay then." She turned and walked out of the kitchen like she'd won something. She had no idea I'd just let her step into a trap she built for herself. And I wasn't going to stop her. Rebecca always needed an audience. That's not bitterness talking, it's just biology at this point. So I wasn't surprised when, exactly 3 days after I signed the divorce papers, she staged her little woe is me brunch with her inner circle. Amanda, the forever divorced wine snob. Kelly, who couldn't keep a secret if it was tattooed inside her eyelids. And Heather, her oldest friend, and possibly the only one in the room who still remembered what Rebecca looked like before the Botox and filtered Instagram reels. They met at that ridiculous place downtown with the overpriced beet salad and fake rustic furniture. I only knew because Amanda posted the mimosa tower on her story like a crime scene. I watched it silently while folding my gym clothes into duffel bags, smiling at how quick Rebecca had transitioned from wife to narrative. She leaned in dramatically, oversized sunglasses perched like armor on her face, and said with just the right amount of tremble, "He didn't even try to save our marriage. 19 years, and he just smiled, signed, walked away." Amanda clutched her chest like someone had flatlined mid-mimosa. "Are you serious? He didn't say anything?" Rebecca shook her head slowly, milking it. Not one question. Not even, why? It's like I was a stranger. Kelly, predictably, went full Lifetime movie. That's sociopathic. Bex. Like, stone cold. Who does that? Heather didn't say much. Just stirred her straw through the melting ice in her glass, eyes squinting a little tighter than usual. I'd always suspected Heather had a brain under all that curated neutrality. And from the way she tilted her head when Rebecca kept talking, I could tell she smelled something burning beneath all the theatrics. Because here's the thing Rebecca didn't expect. Sympathy is a currency, and she'd just tried to cash in too early. Divorce is messy, loud, painful. But when the man you left doesn't kick or scream or beg to stay, when he just disappears like fog under sun, people get curious. Whispers start. Maybe it wasn't that simple. Maybe there's more. Meanwhile, I was in the middle of my own quiet exodus. No announcements. No dramatic exits. Just cold, deliberate movement. I didn't take everything. Just what was mine. Things I bought. Things I earned. Things with meaning. I left the fake antique mirror she claimed was us. I left the book she never read, the Lou Cruzit pot we got as a wedding gift and used twice. But I took the handwritten note she once left in my briefcase on our 3rd anniversary, before her eyes started drifting toward other people's reflections. I kept it not out of sentiment, but because it might come in handy later. Rebecca watched the house get emptier each day like she was watching an hourglass she hadn't noticed was flipped. Every time she came home from yoga or her casual networking dinners, another closet would echo. And still, no message. No confrontation. No, let's talk. She thought I'd fall apart without her orbiting me. She hadn't realized I'd already broken free of her gravity. By the end of week 2, I was gone. No argument. No grand farewell. No teary voicemail with sad piano music in the background. Just absence. Complete and surgical. I changed my number. Deleted my social media. Rerouted my mail to a private mailbox that didn't even bear my name. The utilities on the house, her house now, were quietly transferred to her account. Even my Spotify stopped syncing to the kitchen speakers. It was like I'd been erased, pixel by pixel, from the digital painting of our marriage. And that's what really got to her. Not the divorce, not even the silence. It was the invisibility. She expected heartbreak, rage, drunk texts at 2 a.m., maybe a dramatic call to one of her friends begging to talk. But what she got was nothing. And that kind of quiet? It's not peace, it's power. I moved into a sleek apartment across the lake. Bellevue, top floor, minimal furniture, just how I like it. The kind of place where the doors close with a satisfying hush, where nobody knows your name and nobody cares. The concierge knew better than to give out unit numbers, especially to frantic women in Lululemon leggings claiming, "I'm his wife." She tried. Oh, I know she tried. She called my office, apparently, only to learn I'd gone fully remote and taken a new consulting contract through a different firm. She messaged my old gym buddies, but most of them weren't real friends, just spotters and grunters who knew me as Dan. She even reached out to my mother, which had to be a last resort because Rebecca hated her. My mom told her, and I quote, "Maybe if you'd loved him as much as you love your Pilates instructor, he'd have stayed in touch." That must have stung. Rebecca, in her prime, ran social circles like a chessboard. She always needed to control the narrative. And she had a way of bending perception. Always the victim, always the misunderstood one. But it's hard to steer a story when the other character simply walks out of the plot. She started texting. "Rebecca, hey, just wondering if we can maybe talk? I feel like this is all happening too fast." Nothing. "Rebecca, can we at least agree on what we're telling people? It's confusing for the kids. For our friends." Still nothing. We didn't have kids. But I guess she thought throwing the word in would sting. Then came the email. Subject line, closure? I didn't open it. Just archived it. There's a special kind of power in not reacting. It's not revenge. It's discipline. I could imagine her pacing through the house, opening drawers, checking the closet again, wondering if I'd left anything. A note. A post-it. Even a pair of socks she could toss dramatically to the floor. But there was nothing. Not even my scent. That's when the silence started whispering to her. Because silence has a way of twisting into something louder than screams. It starts to make you question your version of events. It starts to eat at the edges of your memory. And that's exactly where I wanted her. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Unsettled. Heather didn't bring it up right away. She waited. That was her style, let things simmer. But eventually, curiosity got the better of her. Or maybe she just wanted to watch Rebecca squirm. It was during a lazy Saturday lunch, Rebecca halfway through a kale Caesar and 2 glasses deep into a crisp Chardonnay, when Heather casually stirred her straw and said, "So, I think I saw Daniel last week." Rebecca froze, her fork paused mid-stab. "Where?" Heather shrugged, slow and deliberate. "Canless." Rebecca snorted. "Please. Daniel hates places like that. The man thinks anything with a sommelier is a scam." "Right," Heather said, eyes narrowing. "That's what I thought too. But it was him. Black button-down, new watch. Looked good, actually. Better than I've ever seen him." Rebecca tried to laugh, but it caught awkwardly in her throat. Was he alone? That's when Heather hesitated, and Rebecca felt it, that slight tilt in the air, the moment just before you learn something you're not ready to hear. "No," Heather said, softly now. "He was with someone." Rebecca leaned back in her chair too fast, her wine sloshing. "Who?" "She was. I don't know. Stunning. That quiet, expensive kind of stunning. Long dark hair, navy dress, pearl earrings. They were tucked into the corner booth, drinking red wine. Laughing. Laughing, Rebecca echoed, voice brittle. Heather nodded. and she touched his wrist when he stood up. Like it was normal. Rebecca's lips tightened. You must have been mistaken. Daniel's not the type to eat. I wasn't mistaken. Heather reached into her bag like she was fishing for gum and instead pulled out her phone. A few taps later, she angled the screen across the table, her voice apologetic but firm. I wasn't going to show you this, but I figured. You should see. Rebecca stared at the photo. It wasn't staged. It wasn't clear. But there he was, Daniel, in profile, smiling in a way she hadn't seen in years. There was something in his posture too, shoulders relaxed, chin tilted just slightly, like he was actually present. Alive. The woman across from him had her hand on his wrist, and even in the grainy image, you could tell she wasn't trying to impress him. She already had. Rebecca's face didn't change, not at first. She handed the phone back with the same grace she used to fake orgasms, controlled, indifferent. But Heather watched her eyes, not her mouth. And Rebecca's eyes had just flinched. He didn't even tell me he was seeing someone, Rebecca muttered, stirring her now warm wine. You're divorced, Heather said gently. He doesn't have to. Rebecca didn't respond. She just stared past Heather, through the window, to the couple walking their golden retriever across the street. They looked so nauseatingly peaceful. Inside her, something began to crack, not quite pain. Not sadness either. It was something sourer, older, a flavor she denied herself for years. Jealousy. And she hated it. Because Daniel was never supposed to be the one to leave with grace. He was supposed to fade into beige, maybe date someone painfully average, gain 10 pounds, and start talking about craft beer and lawn care. But this? High-end restaurants. Expensive watches. Elegant women who touched his wrist like it meant something? That wasn't the script she wrote. And for the first time, it hit her. Maybe she didn't know Daniel at all. Or worse, maybe she never did. She told herself it was just a detour. It started innocently. Rebecca left her book club early, bored out of her mind by yet another discussion about emotional labor and rediscovering midlife purpose. She plugged in a random podcast and drove. No destination. Just movement. But somehow, the tires knew before her mind did. 30 minutes later, she was turning onto a quiet, tree-lined street in Bellevue, slowing down in front of a sleek glass and steel high-rise with minimalist signage that whispered wealth. The Perch. She hated how pretentious the name sounded. And she hated even more how the valet didn't even glance at her Lexus as she pulled up across the street and killed the engine. For a while, she just sat there, pretending to scroll through her phone. But her eyes kept drifting upward, to the 8th floor, where golden lights softened against navy curtains, casting gentle glows on the floor-to-ceiling windows. Then she saw them. Silhouettes. 2 of them. One was unmistakably Daniel, broad shoulders, hands in his pockets, pacing slowly the way he used to when thinking through problems. And the other? The woman from the photo, probably. Hair tied up in an elegant twist, wine glass in one hand, posture impeccable even in shadow. Rebecca stared, frozen. The woman turned slightly, just enough to lean into Daniel's space as he spoke, her head tilting back in a laugh Rebecca hadn't heard in their home in over a decade. That's when the nausea kicked in. Because it wasn't just that he had moved on. It was how. There was grace in that room. Intimacy. The kind that doesn't come from flings or petty revenge. The kind that roots itself quietly, like a tree that was planted before you even realized there was soil. Rebecca found herself hunched forward in her seat, breathing through her nose, hand gripping the steering wheel with fingers gone white. Who the hell was she? The wine glass. The gesture. The way she carried herself, she wasn't just some young office assistant or yoga instructor looking for a divorced man with a good 401k. No. This woman had presence. She didn't need to take up space. She owned it just by standing there. Rebecca adjusted the mirror and caught her own reflection. Tired eyes. Makeup smudged from the day. Lipstick faded. Roots showing under her balayage. And her blouse, once sharp and tailored, now sagged a little from the seatbelt crease. It hit her then, like a slow, mean trick. She no longer looked like the woman Daniel would choose, not now, not against her. She stayed there for almost 20 minutes, watching shadows move through that glowing room, watching Daniel refill wine, pull a chair out, laugh again. And not once, did he look toward the window. He didn't know she was there. But worse, he didn't care. She made it 3 more days before caving. 3 days of half sleeping with her phone clutched in hand, pretending to herself that she didn't care, that she wasn't obsessively checking for updates on Daniel's LinkedIn, scouring tagged photos, Googling floor plans for the perch to guess which unit faced the lake. 3 days of trying to carry on her carefully curated life, Pilates, skincare, networking lunches, while the silence stretched like a tight rubber band pulling at her sanity. So she did what she swore she wouldn't. At 11:42 p.m., with her robe cinched too tightly and her Chardonnay glass sweating on the marble nightstand, she opened their old text thread, the one still pinned to the top of her messages, and typed, "Rebecca, Daniel, can we talk?" She hovered over the screen. Read it 6 times. Deleted the question mark. Put it back. Her thumb shook when she hit send. The typing indicator didn't appear for almost 5 minutes, and she nearly convinced herself he wouldn't answer at all. Then it came. "Daniel, what's left to discuss?" No punctuation. No warmth. Just flat, cool dismissal. Rebecca stared at the screen as the weight in her chest turned to concrete. She read it again, hoping it might somehow morph into something more generous. But it didn't. It just sat there. What's left to discuss? It wasn't cruelty. That's what made it worse. It was indifference. She had braced for anger, for a snarky jab, even a guilt trip. But this sterile, surgical detachment, it was like trying to scream in a vacuum. She couldn't even weaponize it. There was no thread to pull, no emotion to exploit. Just a wall. She didn't reply. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't feel pathetic. Instead, she stared at their message history, 19 years of shared life reduced to this barren digital thread. Trips planned, groceries listed, jokes, emojis, midnight I love yous. All leading up to that final line. What's left to discuss? For the first time, she realized the conversation had ended long before the divorce. She just hadn't noticed. Daniel had stopped speaking long ago. She just filled the silence with her own voice, convinced it was a dialogue. She turned her phone face down, but the glow still bled through the fabric of the pillow. Rebecca lay there in the dark, breath shallow, eyes open. And outside, somewhere across the lake, a window glowed warm against the deep blue. But it wasn't hers anymore. It was raining the way Seattle rains when the city wants to shame you, quiet, constant, like it's whispering all your worst decisions back at you. Rebecca sat in her car outside the perch for a full 11 minutes, engine running, wipers ticking a slow, anxious rhythm. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was up in a lazy bun. No armor. No script. Just impulse. And desperation. She told herself it wasn't a big deal. She just wanted to talk. Just to clear the air. Maybe. Salvage something. But as she stepped under the awning, soaked and breathless, she realized she hadn't thought past the lobby. The concierge barely looked up. "Name." "Rebecca Alden," she said, almost daring him to react. "I'm here to see Daniel Alden." The pause was everything. A soft, polite delay, like the air being sucked out of a room. He tapped a few keys. Mr. Alden didn't note any visitors tonight. "I'm his wife." The man glanced up now. His face was unreadable. She caught a flicker of something in his expression, not judgment exactly, just that faint trace of recognition people get when they realize they're looking at someone who's already lost. "I'll ring up." A long pause followed. The kind that makes your skin crawl. She imagined Daniel standing in his minimalist living room, maybe barefoot, maybe holding a glass of something expensive, seeing her name flash on the screen. She pictured him exhaling slowly, weighing something invisible in his palm. Then, "He says you can come up." Elevator 3. Penthouse level. Her heart slammed into her ribs. The ride up felt longer than it was. The elevator was silent except for the rain sliding down the glass walls. As Bellevue glittered below her, she caught her reflection, dripping wet, eyes wide, face pale. For a second, she didn't even recognize herself. She stepped out into a hallway that looked more like an art gallery than a residence. Warm wood, soft lights, silence so thick it muffled her thoughts. His door was already cracked open. She pushed it. The scent hit her first, not Daniel's cologne, not his aftershave. Something richer. Amber, sandalwood, a faint hint of wine. Music played low in the background, Chet Baker, lazy and perfect. And there he was. Daniel stood near the open kitchen, back turned, pouring a glass of red. He didn't look surprised. Didn't move toward her. Just glanced over his shoulder and said, "You're wet." She stepped in, unsure if she was even welcome. "It's raining." Daniel handed her a towel, not warm, not cold, just dry. That small gesture wrecked her more than yelling ever could. She looked around. The place was beautiful, understated, intentional. Every object had a place. Nothing extra. No clutter, including her. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice caught when she saw it, the faint reflection in the glass balcony door. A woman's silhouette, sitting on the couch just out of view, one leg crossed elegantly over the other, a book in hand. Rebecca froze. Daniel noticed. We were just about to eat. It wasn't said cruelly. It wasn't performative. Just honest. Rebecca stood in his hallway, soaked, small, and suddenly very aware of every choice she'd made in the last year. Her hand clenched the towel like it was a life vest. Daniel turned back to his wine, and for a second, she saw something terrifying in his face. Peace. He had truly moved on, and she had just walked into a life that no longer had a Rebecca-shaped space. She took 2 hesitant steps into the living room, unsure whether to follow the tension or run from it. Her heels tapped softly against the polished floor, and every click sounded like a mistake. The apartment was dim, but the kind of dim that spoke of intention, warm lighting, amber shadows, soft jazz whispering through the air. And then she saw her. The woman was perched on the edge of the slate-gray sofa, legs crossed like a ballerina on break, her dress fluid and perfectly unwrinkled despite sitting. She held a crystal glass of red wine in one hand, her other hand resting gently against the side of her face as she turned to regard Rebecca with polite, detached curiosity. There was something familiar about her. Cheekbones that defied age, that quiet confidence that money can't buy and yoga can't fake. Rebecca's stomach flipped, but her brain couldn't place it. A distant memory flickered, just out of reach. Daniel stepped between them, calm as a surgeon. He poured a second glass of wine with the same deliberate grace he used to fix cabinet hinges, steady, patient, utterly unbothered. He offered it to the woman, not to Rebecca. Then, with a glance at Rebecca, he said, "Sorry, we already started." 4 words. Not hostile, not mocking, just firm, final, like she was interrupting a meeting, like she had wandered into someone else's dinner party by mistake. Rebecca opened her mouth, but couldn't summon a sentence. She was still trying to decode the woman's face, still trying to understand why something in her brain screamed, "I know you," while everything else inside her screamed, "Get out." Daniel sat beside the woman with natural familiarity. He didn't put his arm around her. He didn't have to. The intimacy was in the space between them, measured, quiet, well-practiced. This wasn't new. This wasn't a rebound. This was real. Rebecca suddenly felt her wet clothes clinging to her body like a costume, her hair frizzing out at the edges, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. She looked like the past, like a ghost who hadn't realized she was already dead. She turned to Daniel, reaching for anything, even sarcasm. "You don't waste time." He sipped his wine. "You did." The woman raised an eyebrow at that, amused. Not cruel, just interested, like she was watching a play with unexpected dialogue. Rebecca's throat burned. I thought maybe we could talk," she said, softer now, aware of how small her voice had become. Daniel set his glass down. "I thought we did. The day you handed me the papers." Humiliation flushed her neck, crawling up behind her ears like fire. There was no yelling, no accusations, just this unbearable poise. He wasn't punishing her. He had already dismissed her. The elegant woman glanced between them, then leaned toward Daniel slightly. "Do you want me to give you 2 a moment?" Rebecca caught it then. That voice. Something clicked. College. A dorm party. A shared major. A stupid, petty betrayal that Rebecca had written off as nothing. A girl she had called forgettable behind her back when she got too close to one of Rebecca's old flings. What was her name? Margot? Morgan? No, Monica. And suddenly, Rebecca remembered exactly who this woman was. But Daniel said nothing, and that silence told her everything. Her past had walked back into her life, and she was no longer the main character in it. Rebecca stood there like a vase no one knew where to place, too valuable to throw out, too awkward to display. Her voice came out thinner than she expected, laced with disbelief she hadn't even processed until now. "You've moved on already?" she asked, the question almost childish, like catching someone opening presents before Christmas. Daniel didn't sigh, didn't scoff. He just tilted his head slightly, brow relaxed, as if weighing the weather. You decided quickly, he said, swirling his wine. I respected your choice. There was no edge in his voice. That was what made it unbearable. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He wasn't trying at all. The words just were. Like facts in a textbook. Monica, because yes, now she was certain, it was Monica, glanced at Daniel with quiet confusion, then turned back to Rebecca with the polite curiosity of someone realizing they've walked into a subplot. I'm sorry, she said, voice gentle, eyes genuinely puzzled. Who is this? Rebecca blinked. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her name caught on her tongue, like dust on old silk. Daniel didn't rush to answer. He took another sip of wine, leaned back slightly, and said, without looking at her, this is Rebecca, my ex-wife. Monica's eyebrows rose just a little, not in shock, not in judgment. Just surprise, like she'd been told someone was no longer on the guest list, but hadn't expected to meet them at the door anyway. Oh, she said softly. I didn't realize. Rebecca flinched. It wasn't what Monica said. It was how she said it. With grace. With honest detachment. As if her presence here was an unexpected complication in an otherwise peaceful evening. The room swallowed her. She'd come here armed with anxiety and unresolved questions. Hoping. What? That he'd fight? That he'd cry? That he'd pull her aside? Say this was a mistake? Tell her he still thought about her when he couldn't sleep? But he was sleeping now. Eating. Laughing. Existing. Without her. And worse. In front of someone who had replaced her so effortlessly it made the marriage feel imaginary. Rebecca's voice came back in a whisper. She doesn't even know who I am. Daniel finally looked at her again, his expression unreadable. That's not her fault. And there it was. Not anger. Not cruelty. Just truth. Rebecca backed up slowly, towel still in her hand like she was clinging to proof she'd once belonged here. But she didn't. She was a footnote now. A plot twist long resolved. And all she could do was watch as Daniel turned back to Monica, resumed their dinner conversation like a page resumed after a brief crease. She'd arrived hoping to stir something. Grief. Guilt. Longing. But she'd only confirmed the worst thing of all. She didn't matter anymore. Rebecca stood frozen in the doorway, soaked, small, unraveling thread by thread in a space that no longer made room for her shadow. Monica had turned back to her book. Daniel had returned to his wine. And the silence between them, so calm and lived in, made Rebecca feel like she was witnessing a life she'd been erased from long ago. Her voice cracked before she even realized she was speaking. Did you? Her throat tightened. Did you ever truly love me? The question came out too quiet, almost childlike. Not a weapon. Not a test. Just raw, naked uncertainty, as if asking could rewind time or stitch something closed that had long since torn open. Daniel didn't answer right away. He just looked at her. Not cruelly. Not with resentment. With remembering. And that was worse. He set his wine glass down with the kind of care you give to things you once treasured. Then he straightened slightly, rested one hand gently on his knee, and said, his voice low and deliberate, I did. Deeply. Every day. Even when it was hard. Even when I felt small in rooms you wanted to outgrow. Rebecca blinked fast, something stinging at the corners of her eyes. Daniel continued, softer now. Until you stopped loving us. That word. Us. Not me. Not me and you. Us. As if the marriage had been a third living thing in the room, something that needed feeding, listening, tending. And she'd let it wither, watching it shrink between her and Daniel like a dying houseplant she blamed him for forgetting to water. Rebecca opened her mouth, but no apology would form. No argument. No defense. What could she even say? That she was busy? That she didn't realize she was making him feel like a burden when she told him to just get over it every time he reached out? There was no script for this. Only the dull ache of a door that had been closed for so long she didn't notice it had locked. Daniel stood up, not to walk her out. Just to stretch, or maybe to give her the unspoken signal that this conversation was over. He didn't look angry. He looked resolved. Monica didn't turn her head again. She just kept reading. The lamp beside her cast a golden light over her page and the edge of Daniel's shoulder, like the universe was highlighting the part of the story that mattered now. Rebecca turned, slowly, towel still clutched like a forgotten apology, and walked to the door. No one followed, and no one stopped her. Daniel's words echoed behind her, not as bitterness, not as accusation, just a verdict, and no appeal. The hallway was colder than she remembered. Or maybe it was just her. Rebecca stepped out without looking back, feet numb inside heels she now regretted choosing. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the door for a second, just a second, like maybe the wood would soften, maybe the moment would stretch open and let her back in. It didn't. The door closed behind her with the softest click she'd ever heard. No slam, no bang, just finality. No footsteps followed. No voice called her name. No last-minute confession to chase after. Only the whir of the elevator and the muffled sound of a jazz trumpet dissolving into the walls. She pressed the elevator button, heart thudding in that sick, uneven way that happens when your body hasn't caught up to what your mind already knows. It's done. She didn't cry. Not because she didn't want to, but because there was no room left for it. The grief had dried into something quieter. Shame maybe, or regret, or just the echo of choices she made while assuming she'd always have time to fix them. As the elevator doors slid open, she turned slightly, reflex, not hope. Still nothing. Daniel hadn't moved. And why would he? He had already left long before she ever showed up tonight. He just happened to do it silently, elegantly, without the fireworks she used to weaponize. No yelling, no drama, just slow, deliberate distance. Like watching fog lift off a lake you didn't realize had gone still. The ride down was endless. She caught her reflection in the mirrored walls, drenched hair, runny mascara, face tight with a kind of tired that no skincare routine could cover. She didn't look like the woman who handed him divorce papers 5 weeks ago with a smug smile and a pre-rehearsed monologue about needing space. She looked like someone who finally understood what space really meant. Downstairs, the lobby was empty. The concierge glanced up but said nothing. Just nodded once, respectfully, like someone silently closing a file. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. Rebecca stepped into it without bothering to raise her umbrella. And up above, on the 8th floor, Daniel poured himself another glass of wine, sat back beside Monica, and exhaled. Not triumphantly, not dramatically, just completely. He didn't check his phone, didn't watch her walk away through the glass. He simply picked up the conversation where it had left off, as if nothing and no one had interrupted. The house felt louder now, not from noise, but from absence. The echo of Daniel's steady footsteps no longer pacing down the hall. The silence where his cough used to drift from the other room when he was reading late. The emptiness beside her in bed was no longer metaphor, it had weight, a shape, a void that pulled at her spine when she laid down at night and stared at the ceiling like it might offer an answer. Rebecca scrolled. Endlessly. Mindlessly. The blue light from her phone painted her face a tired shade of ghost, thumb swiping through feeds she barely absorbed. Influencers. Sponsored ads. Acquaintances with birthday cakes and puppies. Her hand moved by instinct now. Her brain was somewhere else, stuck, rewinding, haunted by phrases she couldn't unhear. You decided quickly. I respected your choice. She didn't know what she was looking for until she found it. It was tucked between a beach photo and a poorly lit plate of sushi, posted by someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Monica. The Monica. Her profile was sleek, curated, elegant. A woman who had never needed noise to draw attention. And there it was. The photo. A soft shot. Golden hour. Daniel and Monica seated at an outdoor table, wine in their hands, smiling, not posed, not performative. The kind of smile you didn't plan. The kind that came from real peace. Daniel's hand was resting casually atop hers. Her nails were the same soft pink they'd been in the apartment. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. Because now, she remembered everything. Monica Prescott. Junior year. Study group in Professor Halpern's ethics seminar. Monica had been sharp, warm, generous. And Rebecca, drunk on the rush of always being the center of attention, had casually dismantled her. Spread a few lies. Flirted with the guy Monica had a real shot with. A few weeks later, Monica changed majors. Switched dorms. Disappeared. Rebecca hadn't thought of her since. Until now. Until Monica reappeared in Daniel's life like a quiet reckoning. Rebecca clicked the photo. The caption was simple. Barely a whisper. Sometimes happiness begins exactly where desperation ends. No tags, no hashtags, no heart emojis. Just truth. Rebecca stared at the screen until her eyes burned, then turned it face down on the nightstand. She didn't cry. Not because she wasn't broken, but because even her sorrow felt too late now. Grief belonged to something that might return. This, what she felt now, was something colder. Final. The house creaked around her like it was remembering him. Every room, every wall, still bore fingerprints of the man she had mistaken for permanent. And now? He was someone else's future. Someone who remembered. Someone who forgave. Someone who loved him back before it was too late. Rebecca lay back in there, her bed, suddenly aware of how small she felt in it. Not physically, existentially. Like the world had continued without her, and the only thing left was the hollow she made by choosing the wrong moment to stop loving. The rain whispered outside. Her phone stayed dark, and for the first time since this began, she understood what she'd lost. Not just Daniel, but the version of herself that might have deserved him.
The pregnancy test wasn't mine. That much was obvious. I found it shoved in the trash can of our master bathroom, hidden beneath a crumpled pile of tissues and an empty shampoo bottle. Positive. 2 solid pink lines, clear as day. My hands froze when I pulled it out, and for a second, I just stared at it, trying to wrap my head around the fact that my wife, Mallory, hadn't said a damn word to me. We weren't trying for a baby. In fact, she'd been dodging any kind of intimacy with me for months. Headaches, late nights at work, her need for space. Every excuse in the book. But suddenly, there it was. Proof. Not just of a pregnancy, but of something much, much darker. My mind raced as I stood there, holding the test with the kind of fury and disbelief that makes your chest tighten until you can't breathe. I knew Mallory well enough to know she didn't make mistakes. She was calculating, always 3 steps ahead. And if she'd let this slip, it was because she never thought I'd find it. Or maybe she was just arrogant enough to think I wouldn't put the pieces together. I didn't confront her right away. That would have been too easy. No, I needed to be smart about this. Mallory was a master manipulator, and if I came at her with nothing but suspicions, she'd twist it all around until I was the one apologizing by the end of it. I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Instead, I put the test back exactly where I found it, taking care to rearrange the trash so it looked untouched. Then I walked out of that bathroom like nothing had happened, even though my entire world had just flipped upside down. My hands were still shaking when I sat down at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll through my phone as I listened for her footsteps upstairs. When she finally came down, hair damp from the shower, she didn't even glance at me, just poured herself a coffee and started scrolling through Instagram like she didn't have a care in the world. Couldn't believe it. She had the audacity to act like everything was normal, like I didn't just stumble across the most damning evidence of her betrayal. I wanted to scream, to throw the mug of coffee right out of her smug, oblivious hands and demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I smiled at her, calm as a saint, and said, "You look like you slept well. Long day at work today." Mallory glanced up briefly, her expression unreadable, then shrugged. Same old. Meetings, deadlines, the usual. The casual way she said it made my stomach churn. She wasn't just lying. She was good at it. Effortless. But if she thought I was just some oblivious husband who'd let her get away with whatever she was doing, she had another thing coming. I was going to figure out exactly what she was hiding, and when I did, she'd regret ever underestimating me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was restless or second-guessing myself, but because my brain was in overdrive. Mallory was playing a game, and I needed to learn the rules if I was going to beat her. I lay there, listening to her soft, even breathing as she slept beside me, completely unaware of the storm she'd unleashed. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation for the pregnancy test, but deep down I already knew better. By morning I had a plan. I decided to start small. Observe her, look for inconsistencies, let her think she was in control. People like Mallory get careless when they think they've already won. I just had to be patient. At breakfast she acted like nothing was wrong. She even kissed me on the cheek, which felt like an insult now, a sick little performance meant to keep up appearances. I played my part too, smiling and laughing at her jokes, but all the while, I was watching her every move. I noticed the way she clutched her phone, like it was glued to her hand. Normally, She'd leave it on the counter or the coffee table, but not today. She even took it with her to the bathroom, which was strange considering how long she'd stay in there. 15, 20 minutes sometimes. Everything okay? I asked casually as she came out of the bathroom for the third time that morning. You've been in there a lot lately. Mallory froze for half a second, just long enough to register the question, then recovered with a quick laugh. Yeah, just some stomach issues. Probably that sushi we had the other night. That was a lie. We hadn't eaten sushi in weeks. I smiled and nodded, pretending to buy it, but inside, my resolve hardened. If she was lying about something as small as that, what else was she lying about? Later that day, while she was at work, I decided to dig deeper. I'd never been the type to snoop, but this was different. This wasn't paranoia, this was self-preservation. I started with the trash, going through every piece of it, even though I hated myself for doing it. Sure enough, I found another clue. A crumpled receipt from a boutique in the next town over. It was dated 2 days ago and listed items I'd never seen in our house. Luxury candles, silk lingerie, and a men's cologne. My heart was pounding as I stared at the receipt. She hadn't bought those things for me. That much was obvious. But for who? And why? I felt like I was in a bad movie, piecing together clues in real time. The pregnancy test, the unexplained purchases, the constant late nights at work. It was all adding up to something I didn't want to admit out loud just yet. That evening, I tested her again. We were sitting on the couch, watching some mindless reality show, when I casually asked, "So, who's the cologne for?" Mallory's head snapped toward me, her expression a mix of confusion and panic. "What are you talking about?" I held up the receipt, watching her face carefully. "This, from Tuesday. I didn't realize you'd gone shopping." For a split second, her mask slipped. Her eyes widened, and her mouth opened like she was about to say something. But then she recovered. She laughed, like I just told a stupid joke. "Oh, that's for my boss. His birthday's coming up, and the team pitched in for a gift." I didn't think it was a big deal, so I didn't mention it. It was a good lie, quick, believable, and just vague enough to discourage follow-up questions. But it wasn't good enough. Not this time. "Oh, nice of you to take the lead on that," I said, smiling like I believed her. "I'm sure he'll love it." Mallory relaxed, sinking back into the couch with a relieved sigh. She had no idea I was on to her, that I was already 2 steps ahead. This wasn't just about catching her anymore. This was about making sure that when the truth came out, she couldn't wriggle her way out of it. The next step in my plan was to confirm what my instincts were screaming at me. Mallory had secrets, and I was done giving her the benefit of the doubt. If she wanted to play games, she'd soon learn I wasn't the clueless husband she thought I was. The following morning, after she left for work, I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her. It wasn't a random decision. Her late nights at the office had been too frequent, too convenient, and I wanted to see for myself where she was really going. I waited down the street, parked behind an old pickup truck where she couldn't see me. At first, everything seemed normal. She pulled out of the driveway in her sleek white SUV, coffee in hand, looking every bit the polished professional. I stayed a safe distance behind, following her route downtown, expecting her to head to her office like she always said she did. But she didn't. Instead, Mallory took an unexpected turn, one that led her straight to a quaint little cafe on the edge of town. My pulse quickened as I parked a block away, far enough not to be noticed but close enough to watch her every move. She stepped out of the car, wearing an outfit far too nice for work, a fitted dress I hadn't seen before, paired with heels that clicked sharply against the pavement. My stomach churned as I realized this wasn't just a coffee run. She walked into the cafe like she owned the place, and within minutes, a man joined her. He was tall, dressed in business casual, with the kind of easy confidence that made my blood boil. They sat together at a corner table, leaning in close, talking and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. Her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to storm in there, flip the table, and demand answers. But I held back. Losing my cool now wouldn't get me the proof I needed. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a few photos, my hands shaking as I zoomed in to capture their cozy little rendezvous. They stayed there for over an hour, sipping lattes and sharing what looked like a pastry. When they finally left, I kept my distance, following as they walked back to their cars. The man reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Mallory's face before leaning in to kiss her cheek. She didn't pull away. If anything, she lingered, smiling up at him like he was the center of her universe. I felt sick, furious, but most of all, I felt betrayed in a way I hadn't thought possible. Watching her with him, so carefree and intimate, was like a punch to the gut. But instead of letting the anger consume me, I forced myself to stay focused. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I drove home in silence, my mind racing with questions. Who was he? How long had this been going on? And how much longer did she think she could keep me in the dark? I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure: Mallory had underestimated me. And when the time came, I'd make damn sure she regretted it. When Mallory came home that evening, she was all smiles, carrying takeout bags like the picture of a loving wife who wanted to surprise her husband. It was almost laughable. She set the bags on the kitchen counter and kissed me on the cheek like she didn't just spend her morning giggling over pastries with her mystery man. "I got your favorite," she chirped, pulling out boxes of barbecue ribs and mac and cheese. "Figured we could have a nice dinner together. You've been working so hard lately." I forced a smile, keeping my tone light. "That's thoughtful of you. Thanks, Mal." The way her eyes sparkled with self-satisfaction made my stomach turn. She thought she had me fooled, that I'd eat her ribs and smile like the devoted husband while she played house. But tonight, I wasn't just pretending to be clueless. I was setting the stage. Over dinner, I watched her closely. The way she overcompensated with small talk, throwing out questions about my day and joking about her boss's incompetence. She was putting on a show, likely to cover up the guilt she wasn't ready to admit. I matched her energy, laughing along and even sharing a story about an annoying coworker. The more relaxed she became, the more confident I felt about my next move. After we finished eating, I cleared the plates while she leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. I casually wiped my hands on a dish towel and asked, "So, how's the office these days? You seem busier than ever." She didn't even look up. "Oh, you know how it is. Same old grind. Deadlines, client meetings, the usual. Must be tough juggling everything. I mean, late nights, early mornings. It's impressive." My voice was steady, my face carefully neutral. That got her attention. She glanced up, her smile faltering just slightly. "It's not that bad. Besides, I'm doing it for us, right? Building our future." "Right?" I said, nodding. "Like this morning. You had that coffee meeting, didn't you?" Mallory froze, just for a split second, but it was enough to confirm everything I already knew. Her grip on the phone tightened, and she quickly masked her reaction with a laugh. "Oh yeah, just some networking thing. Nothing exciting." I leaned against the counter, folding my arms. "That's interesting. You never mentioned it before. Networking sounds cozy." Her eyes narrowed slightly, her smile thinning. "Ethan, what's with the third degree? It was just a work thing. Why are you making it sound weird?" "Not at all," I said, raising my hands in mock surrender. "Just curious, that's all." She watched me carefully, clearly trying to gauge whether I was onto her. After a tense moment, she shrugged and turned her attention back to her phone, muttering something about me being paranoid lately. But I wasn't paranoid. I was methodical. That night, after Mallory went to bed, I stayed up reviewing the photos I'd taken earlier. Each one was a dagger, cutting through any lingering hope I had that this was all some misunderstanding. Her smiles, the way she leaned in close to him, the kiss, it was all there in vivid detail. She had no idea I was building my case, piece by piece, ensuring there'd be no escape when the truth finally came out. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was consumed by anger, but because I was planning my next move. Mallory had spent months crafting her web of lies, but she didn't realize I was about to burn it all down. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she was smarter than me. That would be her biggest mistake. The next day, I decided it was time to step up my game. Watching and waiting had served its purpose, but now I needed answers. Real answers. I wasn't going to sit back and let Mallory control the narrative anymore. It was time to dig deeper, and for that I needed leverage. While she was at work, I installed a small tracking app on her laptop. Mallory wasn't exactly tech-savvy, and her passwords were laughably predictable. Within minutes, I had access to her email and calendar. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but pride didn't matter anymore. The truth did. Her email inbox was revealing, to say the least. Among the usual work correspondence were messages from someone named Luke R. The emails weren't explicit, but they didn't have to be. Their playful tone, inside jokes, and frequent meeting arrangements told me everything I needed to know. Luke wasn't just a colleague or a casual friend. He was the guy, the man from the cafe. Then there was her calendar. It was meticulously organized, filled with work meetings, project deadlines, and personal events. One entry, in particular, caught my eye. Friday, 3 p.m. Dr. Carlson, prenatal checkup. My heart stopped. Prenatal checkup. She hadn't just lied about being pregnant. She was actively managing her pregnancy behind my back. The betrayal hit me like a freight train, but instead of letting the rage consume me, I focused on the opportunity it presented. This was my smoking gun. The one thing she couldn't twist or deny. But I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. Not until I could bring everything down in one devastating blow. Later that day, I followed up on the next piece of the puzzle, Luke. His email signature listed his company and title, so I did some digging. It didn't take long to find his LinkedIn profile, a senior consultant at a high-end firm. Married, 2 kids. Perfect. That detail was a gift. It meant I wasn't just dealing with Mallory's lies anymore. Luke had something to lose too. If this man thought he could waltz into my life, destroy my marriage, and walk away unscathed, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. By the time Mallory got home that evening, I'd already begun laying the groundwork for my revenge. She walked through the door, exhausted and distracted, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she tossed her bag onto the counter. "Hey," she said absent-mindedly, rifling through the fridge for a bottle of water. "How was your day?" I smiled, keeping my tone casual. "Not bad. How about yours?" "Busy." She hesitated, her head still buried in the fridge. "Yeah, the usual. Meetings all day. I'm wiped." "Anything interesting come up?" I pressed, my voice steady. She straightened up, glancing at me briefly before shaking her head. "Nope. Just the same old grind." Took everything I had not to laugh. The lies rolled off her tongue so easily, so effortlessly, that I almost admired her audacity. "Almost. Glad to hear it," I said, forcing a smile. "By the way, I was thinking of heading out Friday afternoon. Got some errands to run. That okay with you?" Mallory barely looked up. "Of course. Do whatever you need to." Perfect. She had no idea I'd seen her calendar. No idea I knew about her appointment, or that I planned to be there. As I watched her settle onto the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened, I felt a strange sense of calm. Mallory thought she was untouchable, but she was wrong. So very wrong. This wasn't just about exposing her anymore. It was about making sure she never forgot what happens when you betray someone who trusted you. Friday arrived and I was ready. Mallory left the house in the morning as usual, dressed for work, with her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She kissed me goodbye like everything was fine, like she wasn't hiding an entire double life from me. I smiled back, waved her off, and then got to work. By 2:30, I was parked across the street from the clinic listed in her calendar. The building was small, unassuming, and tucked between a pharmacy and a dental office. I didn't know exactly what I was expecting to find, but my gut told me this was the moment everything would unravel. I waited in the car, eyes glued to the entrance. A steady stream of women came and went, some alone, others with partners or friends. Then, at precisely 2:58, Mallory's white SUV pulled into the lot. She stepped out, looking around nervously, like she knew she was doing something she shouldn't. And then I saw him, Luke. He was already standing by the entrance, wearing a pressed shirt and slacks. Holding a takeout cup of coffee like this was just another casual Friday. Mallory spotted him immediately, her face lighting up in a way that made my stomach churn. She walked up to him, and they embraced. Not a casual hug, but a lingering one, the kind that spoke volumes about what they were to each other. I clenched the steering wheel, forcing myself to stay calm. This was it. Proof. Watching them walk into the clinic together was like a nail in the coffin. They were in this together, and they thought they were untouchable. But they weren't. Once they were inside, I followed. I didn't walk through the main entrance. I wasn't ready to confront them just yet. Instead, I went around the side of the building, looking for another way in. A delivery door was propped open near the back, likely for staff, and I slipped inside unnoticed. The hallway was quiet, lined with generic office doors and bland medical posters. I could hear faint voices coming from down the hall, and I followed the sound until I reached a partially open door. Peering inside, I saw them sitting side by side, talking with a doctor. Mallory was smiling, her hand resting on her stomach as the doctor flipped through a chart. Luke looked every bit the proud partner. Nodding along and asking questions like this was the happiest moment of his life. My blood boiled. I wanted to barge in, to expose them right then and there, but I held back. This wasn't the place or the time. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. Every word, every gesture, every smile. It was all on tape now. Evidence. Unshakable, undeniable evidence. I left the clinic before they even noticed me, my heart pounding with adrenaline and fury. Back in my car, I reviewed the footage, each second fueling the fire inside me. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about humiliation, about destroying the little fantasy world they'd built behind my back. By the time I got home, I had a plan. Mallory was going to pay for what she'd done, not just to me but to herself. And Luke, he wouldn't walk away unscathed either. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to burn their entire charade to the ground. The weekend rolled in like a quiet storm, the kind that everyone feels but no one can predict. Mallory acted as if everything was normal, smiling, chatting, even suggesting we go out for dinner Saturday night. I played along, the perfect picture of a doting husband, but inside, I was building something she wouldn't see coming. My plan was set, and the first step would come at dinner. She picked a swanky Italian restaurant downtown, the kind with candlelit tables and overpriced wine. She wore a deep red dress I hadn't seen before, paired with heels that matched the shade perfectly. She looked stunning, which only made the anger simmering beneath my calm exterior even hotter. She was playing her role, acting like the wife she hadn't been for months, and I let her. For now, we were halfway through the meal, her fork twirling strands of linguine, when I struck. "You know," I said, swirling the wine in my glass, "I've been thinking a lot about our future." Mallory looked up, her smile faltering for a brief moment before she recovered. "Oh? What brought that on?" I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone casual. "I don't know. Lately, you've seemed distracted, like something's been on your mind. I figured maybe it was time we talked about it." She blinked, caught off guard. "Distracted? What are you talking about? I've just been busy with work. You know that." "Work?" I repeated, nodding thoughtfully. "Right. And all those late nights at the office, the networking meetings, the trips out of town. That's all just work." "Huh." Her grip on the fork tightened, her knuckles turning white. "Ethan, I don't know what you're trying to say, but it's starting to sound like you don't trust me." "Oh, I trust you, Mallory," I said, leaning forward now, my voice dropping to a low, measured tone. "I trust you to always look out for yourself, to cover your tracks, to think you're smarter than everyone else in the room. But here's the thing. I'm not as stupid as you think I am." Her face froze, the color draining as I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't even need to unlock it. The thumbnail of the video from the clinic was enough. I held it up, letting her get a good look, watching her world crumble in real time. "What the hell is that?" she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "Oh, you know what it is," I said, my tone almost mocking. "I followed you, Mallory. I saw everything. The clinic, Luke, the little prenatal pep talk with the doctor. You've been busy, haven't you?" Her eyes darted around the restaurant, panic creeping into her features. "Keep your voice down," she whispered, her tone sharp. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I leaned in closer, my voice barely above a whisper now. "Let me guess. You were planning to pin the baby on me, right? Play happy family while sneaking off with Luke whenever you felt like it? Or was he going to stay in the shadows? The little secret you thought I'd never figure out." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time in months, Mallory looked powerless, and it was intoxicating. "Here's the deal," I continued, my voice calm but laced with steel. I've got everything I need. Photos, videos, emails, you name it. So you've got two options. One, you come clean right here, right now, and we figure out what happens next. Or two, I walk out of this restaurant and send all of this to Luke's wife. What's it going to be? Her face twisted into something between fury and fear, her mask slipping entirely. For the first time, the real Mallory was on display. Not the polished, charming version she showed the world, but the cold, calculating liar who thought she could control everything. You wouldn't dare, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. I leaned back, smiling. Try me. Mallory sat there, frozen, her perfectly curated composure unraveling in front of me. The glow of the candlelight seemed to flicker against her now pale face. Her red lipstick suddenly smudged as if the pressure of the moment had physically weighed on her. She opened her mouth, closed it, then glanced around the restaurant like she was searching for an escape route. But there was none. Not this time. You don't know what you're doing, Ethan? She finally whispered, her voice sharp and biting. This is my life. You can't just. Your life. I interrupted, my voice still calm but with enough steel to cut through her excuses. Funny. I thought it was our life, Mallory. But clearly you've been building something else on the side. Don't you think it's time I got to know the full story? She narrowed her eyes, her hands trembling slightly as she placed her fork down. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. You want the truth? Here it is. Yes, I've been seeing Luke. But it's not what you think. I laughed, loud enough to draw a glance from a nearby table. Not what I think. You're joking, right? Mallory, I followed you to the clinic. I saw you with him. You're having his child. For God's sake. What part of that am I misunderstanding? Her expression darkened, the panic in her eyes replaced with something colder. You don't get it. Luke, he's different. He understands me in ways you never could. You've been so boring, Ethan. So predictable. I needed more. There it was. The knife in the chest. She didn't even bother trying to deny it. In fact, she looked almost defiant, like she wanted to hurt me, like my pain was her victory. The realization hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't just lying to protect herself. She wanted to punish me for daring to catch her. I sat back, nodding slowly as her words sank in. Boring? I repeated, my voice low. Predictable. Is that what this was about? You got tired of the man who supported you, who built a life with you, and decided to go play house with someone else? All because you were bored. You're twisting this, she snapped, her voice rising despite her earlier attempt to keep things quiet. I needed something different, something exciting. And don't act like you're some perfect saint. You've been distant, wrapped up in your own little world for months. I let her words hang in the air for a moment, then leaned forward, locking eyes with her. You want to talk about being distant? How about you shutting me out for months, lying to my face, and plotting to make me raise another man's child? Is that exciting enough for you? Her face flushed red with anger, but she didn't respond. She couldn't. There was no defense for what she'd done, and we both knew it. I pulled my phone out again, tapping the screen to bring up the recording from the clinic. You see this? I said, holding it up. This is my insurance policy. This goes straight to Luke's wife if you try to twist this conversation or lie to me again. And trust me, I'll hit send without a second thought. Mallory's defiance cracked, her bravado crumbling as the reality of the situation set in. You wouldn't, she whispered, but her voice wavered. Try me, I said, my tone icy. You thought you could play me, Mallory. You thought I'd never figure it out. But here we are. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything. Everything. And then you're going to start thinking about how to make this right. If you don't, Luke's life explodes, your reputation burns to the ground, and this fairy tale of yours ends in flames. Your move. She stared at me, her eyes wide and full of fear, her hands gripping the edge of the table like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. For the first time in months, Mallory was speechless. I stood up, sliding my phone back into my pocket. Take your time, Mallory, but don't take too long. You're on borrowed time now, and I'm not feeling particularly generous. Without waiting for her to respond, I walked out of the restaurant, leaving her sitting there in stunned silence. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was in control. Mallory had played her cards, and now it was my turn. When I got home, I didn't wait for Mallory. I poured myself a drink, sat down at the kitchen table, and started writing out the final steps of my plan. She thought the dinner confrontation was the climax, but she had no idea what was coming next. The lies she told, the betrayal she orchestrated, and the arrogance she flaunted. It was all going to collapse around her. By the time she came through the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood, I was ready. She hesitated when she saw me, still sitting at the table, calm and collected with my drink in hand. Her mask was back on, fake composure, the practiced smile of someone who thought they still had a chance to salvage control. "You walked out on me," she said, her voice sharp as she set her purse on the counter. "That was humiliating, Ethan." "Good," I said simply, taking a slow sip. "Get used to it." Her jaw clenched. "Are we really doing this? You've made your point. Yes, I made a mistake, but I'm still your wife. We can fix this." I laughed, a cold, bitter sound that made her flinch. "Fix this? Mallory, this isn't a broken vase. You didn't make a mistake. You lied, you cheated, and you tried to trap me into raising another man's child. There's no fixing this." She crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "Fine. You want to end things? Go ahead. But let's not pretend you're some innocent victim here. You've been distant for months, Ethan. You shut me out. You stopped trying. Maybe if you'd paid more attention, none of this would have happened." There it was again, the deflection, the gaslighting, the shameless attempt to make her betrayal my fault. But I didn't take the bait. I stood up, towering over her, and met her glare head-on. "Funny you say that," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "because I've been paying plenty of attention, like when you skipped out of work to meet Luke, or when you bought him that cologne and called it a team gift, or, my favorite, when you walked into that clinic together for your prenatal appointment. Yeah, Mallory, I've been paying attention." Her face turned pale, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "You know, I wasn't planning to get messy," I continued, pacing slowly around the kitchen. "I thought maybe I'd just leave, let you deal with the fallout on your own. But then I thought, no, that's too easy. You don't get to walk away from this like nothing happened." "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling now. I stopped pacing and pulled out my phone again, holding it up so she could see the screen. "I've got everything, Mallory. The photos, the videos, the emails. And guess what? Luke's wife is one click away from seeing all of it." Her eyes widened in horror. "Ethan, no. You can't." "Oh, I can," I interrupted. "And I will. Unless, of course, you want to make this easy for me." She stared at me, her hands trembling as she tried to maintain her composure. "What do you want?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. "First, I want the truth," I said, my tone sharp. "All of it. No more lies, no more games. And second, I want you out. Pack your things, move in with Luke, or wherever the hell you want to go. But you're done here. This is my house, and I'm not sharing it with you for one more second." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You're being unreasonable. We can work this out." "Unreasonable," I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. "You don't get to call me unreasonable. You lied, you cheated, and you tried to trap me in your mess. This is your doing, Mallory, not mine. So, pack your things or I send everything to Luke's wife. Your call." For a moment, I thought she might fight back, but the fire in her eyes flickered and died. She knew she'd lost. Without another word, she turned and walked upstairs, her footsteps heavy with defeat. I stayed in the kitchen, listening as she moved around the bedroom, packing her bags. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally ahead. Mallory had underestimated me, and now she was paying the price. And Luke? His reckoning was coming next. Mallory was gone by the next morning. She didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note, just packed her bags and disappeared like a thief in the night. I watched her car pull out of the driveway from the upstairs window, a strange mix of anger and relief churning inside me. The house felt different without her, quieter, almost hollow. But that emptiness was better than the suffocating weight of her lies. Now it was Luke's turn. I'd spent the night drafting a carefully worded email to his wife, Christine. I knew her name from his social media profile, a detail I'd filed away when I first started digging into him. She seemed like the picture-perfect suburban mom, smiling in every family photo, her kids hanging off her arms, their golden retriever always in the frame. She had no idea what her husband had been up to, but that was about to change. The email was simple but effective. I attached the photos and the video from the clinic, along with screenshots of Luke and Mallory's flirty emails. I didn't embellish or add commentary, just presented the facts. Let the evidence speak for itself. Before sending it, I took one last look at the folder of incriminating files. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. They'd built their little fantasy world on a foundation of lies, and it was time to tear it down. I hit send. The fallout was immediate. Within an hour, Christine responded, her message a whirlwind of shock and gratitude. She hadn't seen it coming, she said, and thanked me for telling her the truth. I could almost hear the devastation in her words, the betrayal cutting her as deeply as it had cut me. But there was no sympathy left in me. Not for her, not for Luke, and certainly not for Mallory. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and sure enough, it was Luke. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he barked, his voice laced with panic. "Cleaning up a mess," I replied coolly. "A mess you helped make. You had no right." "No right?" I cut him off, my tone icy. "You slept with my wife. You lied to your own. And you think I don't have the right to call you out on it? Spare me." Luke was silent for a moment, probably trying to come up with some excuse, but I didn't give him the chance. "Let me make this very clear," I continued. "If you or Mallory try to come near me again, if you so much as send me a text, I'll take this public. I've got more than enough to ruin you completely, Luke. Your wife, your job, your perfect little life. They'll all go up in flames. So, unless you want that, stay out of my way. You're a real piece of work," he spat. But there was no fight left in his voice. "No, Luke," I said, my voice steady. "That's you. I'm just the guy who won't let you get away with it." I hung up before he could respond, a wave of satisfaction washing over me. Luke might have thought he could intimidate me, but he'd just learned the hard way that I wasn't the type to back down. That evening, I poured myself another drink and sat on the back porch, staring out at the yard I'd worked so hard to make my own. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it felt different now. Controlled, directed. Mallory and Luke had tried to destroy me, but in the end, they'd only destroyed themselves. I knew there'd be more fallout in the days to come. Mallory might try to spin the story, and Luke might attempt damage control, but it didn't matter. I had the upper hand now, and I wasn't letting go of it. For the first time in months, I felt free. The days that followed were a whirlwind of aftermath. Christine, Luke's wife, sent me a final email, short, direct, and filled with raw emotion. She told me she was filing for divorce, thanking me again for exposing the truth. She didn't hold back, either, saying she hoped Mallory and Luke got exactly what they deserved. As for Mallory, she tried reaching out once, sending a single, pathetic text. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. There was nothing left to say. Mallory had burned every bridge, and I wasn't about to rebuild it for her. Let her face the consequences. Let her run to Luke or whatever rock she'd crawl under next. She wasn't my problem anymore. The silence in the house felt different now. Peaceful, even. I began focusing on myself for the first time in years, rediscovering hobbies I'd long forgotten. I picked up my guitar again, started running in the mornings, and reconnected with old friends who had always wondered why I'd married someone like Mallory. The weight of her betrayal still lingered, but it no longer defined me. It was just a scar, a reminder of what I'd endured and what I'd overcome. One afternoon, while organizing my office, I came across an old photo of Mallory and me from the early days of our marriage. We were smiling, carefree, wrapped up in a version of love that felt a million miles away now. I stared at it for a long moment, then tossed it into the shredder. That chapter of my life was over. I wasn't the same person anymore, and I had no intention of looking back. As for Mallory and Luke, I heard through mutual acquaintances that their relationship didn't last. Whatever spark they thought they had fizzled out under the weight of guilt, shame, and the destruction they'd caused. Mallory moved to a different city, and Luke's reputation at work took a hit after Christine aired their dirty laundry. Poetic justice, if you ask me. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't just break you. It rebuilds you stronger and smarter than you were before. I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, but in some strange way, I'm grateful for it. It forced me to see things clearly, to shed the dead weight, and to prioritize myself for once. To anyone reading this, wondering if they should stay in a toxic situation or fight for someone who doesn't value them, don't. Walk away. Hold your head high, and let the people who betray you drown in their own mess. Because trust me, there's nothing more satisfying than watching them crumble while you rise.
The moment her laughter broke through the wine-slicked air, something in my chest went still. We were sitting at a long candlelit table in one of those rustic bistros that serve $12 kale, surrounded by her polished friends, women who speak like they're always auditioning for a reality show, and men who nod for a living. I'd come straight from soccer practice with our youngest, still had that faint smell of artificial turf clinging to me. She knew that. She picked the time. I mean, he's amazing with the kids, she said, swirling her Chardonnay, flashing that practiced grin. But let's be honest, he's not a real man. The laughter hit like a slap. It was automatic. Reflexive. One of her friends even snorted. I didn't say a word. Didn't blink. Just reached for the check before the waiter could even ask, dropped my card in the folder, and gave the table a slow, polite smile like I was watching them all from behind bulletproof glass. Babe, don't pout, she added, like I was some toddler denied dessert. You know I'm just teasing. No, she wasn't. Not tonight. Not with them. And we both knew it. When the receipt came, I signed it without looking, folded my napkin, pushed in my chair. Then I walked out. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. The air outside was wet and electric, the kind of heat that soaks into your skin before your clothes. I stood by the curb for 3 seconds before the black SUV rolled up, purring like a secret. The windows were tinted dark enough to make your own reflection feel like someone else. The back door swung open. A woman stepped out. Mid-40s, maybe. No smile, no small talk, just a nod and a clipboard under her arm. Gray suit. No jewelry except for a stainless steel watch that looked more like a countdown than an accessory. Behind me, the restaurant door creaked. Who was that? My wife's voice wobbled, but I didn't turn. I slid into the SUV without a word. The woman climbed in after me, closed the door. We pulled away. I didn't look back, but I could feel her confusion through the glass. Could imagine her standing there, trying to figure out if that was a lawyer, a lover, or something worse. Something she hadn't accounted for. Everything's been set in motion, the woman said evenly, flipping open her tablet. We're just waiting on your final signature for phase 1. I nodded. I'd already made the choices weeks ago. The night I found the photo in her jewelry drawer, folded, old, but recent enough. Her and her so-called trainer, laughing in that same damn bistro, arm in arm like they owned the night. Back then, I didn't explode. I didn't accuse. I calculated. I moved funds. I moved ownership. I smiled at the kids, kissed her goodnight, played my role with such grace she never saw the curtain twitch. But now? Now the first domino had tipped. And the woman next to me, Amanda, senior counsel at a family office so private they don't even have a website, was my insurance policy against every stupid assumption my wife had ever made about what kind of man I was. She's going to call, Amanda said, tapping the screen. You want me to handle it? No, I said. Let her stew. By the time her friends paid their own checks and stepped out to see the SUV disappear down Main Street, their smiles would have wilted. Because whatever story she tried to spin, he's just mad, he's being dramatic, it wouldn't land. They saw that car. They saw me get in. And they saw a woman step out with papers. In that moment, something shifted in the air around her. Something final. I wasn't the soft, easy guy who makes pancakes and apologizes for not being exciting enough. I wasn't the punchline anymore. I was the one leaving her behind in the middle of her perfect little dinner party with her perfect little lies. And I wasn't coming back. 3 months before that dinner, while she was sipping margaritas with her girls on some beach with fake palm trees, I was in a cold office with no windows, across from a woman who didn't blink once the entire meeting. Amanda. Same suit, same tone, same clipboard. You don't find women like her on Yelp. Mr. Langford, she said, sliding a slim folder across the table, I believe you're aware of the risks of passive generosity. But let's get tactical. That was the first time I heard the phrase passive generosity used like an insult. And she was right. I'd been generous, yes. Stupidly so. But not anymore. That day, we began rewriting my entire life on paper. By the second meeting, my name had been separated from every account we shared. Retirement? Split. Savings? Drained and rerouted. The house, the car, even the lake cabin we never used? All transferred to an LLC registered under a trust fund I'd quietly named after my late father. She never met him. Wouldn't even recognize the name. Just thought it was some dead uncle. She thought I spent my Thursday evenings at that Dad Circle parenting group at the community center. I did. For 20 minutes. Then I headed downtown, changed jackets in the car, and took the elevator up to the 19th floor of a building whose parking garage doesn't even list a tenant directory. She thought I was the harmless, weekday husband, the kind you complain about to friends over wine. She used to laugh when I sorted receipts or updated our budget in Excel like I was role-playing as a 1950s accountant. You're cute when you spreadsheet, she'd say, barely looking up from her phone. Cute. Meanwhile, I was tracing every automatic payment she forgot she set up in her name. Subscription boxes, gym memberships, secretive Venmo aliases. I knew more about her me time than she did. My lawyer helped me redraw the lines so slowly, so cleanly, it felt like origami. Quiet folds of paper until everything she thought she held in her hands was actually sitting in a steel cabinet 2 floors below mine. Legally sealed. Legally hers, to admire from a distance. We even drafted a power of attorney for an emergency she doesn't need to know about yet. Amanda called it a just-in-case trigger. I called it an off switch. And the resentment that used to keep me up at night? Gone. Replaced with something colder. Cleaner. Detachment is beautiful when it's planned. The irony is, she used to complain I was too still. You never react, she'd say. You just fold in. She mistook that for weakness. Most people do. What she didn't understand is that men like me don't fold. We record, archive, strategize. We turn off the fire alarms and let the house fill with smoke while everyone else throws wine at the curtains. I wasn't trying to win her back. I was trying to win. And she hadn't even realized a game had started. Because in her world, power was loud, bigger rings, louder voices, flashier dinners. In mine, power was who holds the deed, and who disappears first. It started with a vibration on my phone that I almost ignored. I was standing in the garage, reorganizing a box of Christmas lights in May, because that's what you do when your house is quiet but your mind isn't. I thought it was another spam text, those AI-generated ones promising crypto salvation. But it wasn't. Mirati. Hey. That was awful. You didn't deserve it. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Mira was one of her people. One of the country club brunchers. One of the candle branding, Pilates talking, white wine loyalists who usually laughed at the same jokes my wife made. So why now? Why me? I typed a polite thank you. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Just enough to acknowledge receipt, like a man responding to condolences after a small funeral. But before I hit send, my thumb hovered. Then I added, appreciate that. If you ever want to talk more, lunch is on me. No emoji. No implication. Just bait. She bit. We met the next day at a downtown place my wife had once called too boring for her friends. Quiet tables. Real linen. Nobody taking selfies. Mira walked in without makeup, without pretense. Almost like she wanted to shed something before she crossed the threshold. I don't usually do this, she said, settling into the chair across from me. That makes 2 of us, I said. What followed was 3 courses of emotional excavation. At first, it was light. She apologized again for the dinner. Said she used to think my wife was just joking, that I was in on it. Then her voice cracked on that phrase, like it suddenly felt dirty. But then she leaned in. I know about Darren, she said, glancing over her shoulder. And not just him. That name landed like a weight I'd already memorized. Darren, the tennis trainer. The one I'd photographed by the pool house. But not just him? I kept my face steady. Let her keep going. She talks a lot when she drinks, Mira said. At this little after-hours wine circle thing they do. You weren't just the guy she mocked. You were the excuse. You were the stability she resented needing. That sentence sat with me. The excuse. I was the reason she got to play reckless without guilt. Because I'd be there. Folding laundry. Packing lunches. Picking her up at the airport after trips that weren't always for work. She said you were like wallpaper, Mira added softly. Always there. Easy to ignore until someone else points it out. That one stung more than I expected. Then Mira did something unexpected. She reached into her purse and slid her phone across the table. Text messages. Screenshots. Photos. Nothing graphic, but context is its own crime. Flirty nicknames from numbers I didn't recognize. Inside jokes that didn't include me. Time-stamped girls' nights that were 2 states away from where she said she'd be. She always said you wouldn't care, Mira whispered. Said you'd never do anything. I exhaled through my nose and smiled. Not warmly. Not bitterly. Just surgically. Maybe she's right, I said. But Mira saw it. The shift. She straightened in her chair. You're doing something. I didn't confirm. Didn't deny. I just asked if she'd like dessert. She declined. But she didn't leave. We sat another hour, talking about nothing and everything: kids, schools, the way people pretend better than they live. That night, I got home to find my wife on the couch, wine glass in hand, rewatching an old sitcom she used to say was comfort food. She smiled at me like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't just spent 3 hours with someone who quietly torched her entire facade. Good day? She asked. Yeah, I said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Lunch ran long. It did. And it was worth every second. Thursday, 6:14 p.m. The country club was predictably smug. White stucco walls, overpriced landscaping, valet staff who looked too clean to sweat. I parked a few rows back, under the pretense of attending a gentleman's networking hour, a lie I told no one but myself. The truth was in the glove compartment, a compact DSLR with a long lens, half-charged, ready. She told me she was going to sweat it out with the girls. That was her phrase. Said it like she was in some war zone of Pilates mats and cucumber water. I nodded, smiled, told her to have fun. Then I picked up our son, made him a quesadilla, and watched him build a Lego helicopter with more structural integrity than our marriage. At 6:28, she pulled in. Silver Lexus. Same white tennis skirt she always wore when she wanted to look casually rich. She didn't see me. She never looked around unless there was someone to impress. I waited. The trainer arrived 7 minutes later. Darren. Tan. Toned. The kind of guy who makes a living adjusting rich women's posture and boundaries. I didn't hate him. That would have been too generous. I watched them meet at the court. Rackets in hand. Perform drills for 15 minutes, forehands, backhands, side laughs. But even from my distance, you could tell it wasn't a lesson. It was foreplay in the shape of cardio. At 7:03, they walked toward the pool house. I knew this part. She once joked that nobody goes back there unless they're cheating or hiding. Said it with a smirk, like someone who'd memorized the blueprint. I took the camera, rolled down the passenger window. No shaking. No rage. Just precision. Click. Click. They didn't rush. They didn't hide. It wasn't some panicked teenage tryst. It was choreography. Practiced. Familiar. His hand on her lower back. Her fingers in his collar. Then the kiss. Click. That one stayed on the screen a little longer. She leaned into him like gravity wasn't enough. He braced her hips like he owned them. I zoomed out. Got the background, club logo, the car lot, a glimpse of the clock tower. Context matters when you're building a portfolio. Then I put the camera away. Drove home. Didn't speak to anyone. Didn't drink. Didn't even delete the photos. I just made mac and cheese. At 9:11, she walked in. Hair pulled up, skin glowing from either exertion or satisfaction. It didn't matter. She kissed me on the cheek, breezy and warm, like a wife in a detergent commercial. Thanks for watching the kids. You're amazing, she said, placing her tennis bag on the counter like it hadn't just held the weight of 2 lies and a racket. I looked at her and smiled. Not a sarcastic one. Not bitter. Just still. You have a good workout? I asked. She nodded. We pushed hard today. I bet, I said. She poured a glass of wine, asked what the kids ate, made a comment about the neighbor's trash bins being too full. And I stood there, watching her. Really watching. Not the way a man watches a lover. The way a man watches a machine he's just learned how to shut down, without a sound, without a warning. Because in that moment, I wasn't broken. I was free. Not from her, not yet, but from doubt. And when you take doubt away from a man like me, what you're left with is strategy. She went to bed before me. Said she had a call early in the morning. I stayed up, backing up files to a flash drive. Organizing. Encrypting. Naming folders with innocent labels, Q1 expenses, kids' vaccines, insurance 2024. All lies. But then again, so was she. We met at a nondescript office park behind a dentist's clinic. It was the kind of place you drive past 100 times and never notice, which was exactly the point. Amanda liked shadows, and I was learning to appreciate them too. She was already seated when I arrived, gray blazer, hair tied back, 2 black folders on the table. One labeled exit, the other fallout. I took a seat without speaking, and she slid the exit file toward me with a pen clipped to the top. "You still sure you want this?" she asked, no judgment in her voice, just confirmation. Like a surgeon checking if I was still consenting to amputation. "I've never been more certain," I said. She didn't smile, just nodded. The plan wasn't dramatic. It was elegant. Surgical. First, we initiated the transfer of full legal custody of our children into a shared trust, one that granted me custodial authority and made her the non-controlling beneficiary. In plain English, I would make all the decisions, but she'd still get to feel like a parent on paper. It was dressed in language that sounded fair but wasn't. That was Amanda's specialty, making ruin look like mercy. Then came the financial locks. We froze the joint accounts, without notice. Her credit cards would continue working for 30 days, just enough for her to think nothing had changed. But behind the scenes, everything she spent would trigger alerts and timestamps. We were tracing her rhythm, mapping where she ran when the lights went out. Next, the house. The property had already been moved into the LLC. But now Amanda added something cruelly brilliant. We filed a forbearance clause in the event of marital dissolution, essentially letting me remove her residence rights without violating any formal eviction rules. It looked like a business adjustment, nothing more. But what it meant was that the moment I filed, she'd legally become a guest in her own home. I read each page, each line. Did I hesitate? Not for a second. Not after watching her press her body into another man behind a pool house, then kiss me like I was a doorstop. Not after years of micro-cuts disguised as humor, of turning my silence into her stage. Amanda waited as I signed, page by page. The pen felt heavier than it should have. At the end, she tapped the folder once and said, "You're officially an iceberg, Mr. Langford." She only sees the tip. We scheduled phase 2. This would be the soft demolition. Transferring the family's digital life to a separate cloud account, migrating the kids' school profiles to an alternate email, mine, removing her as the emergency contact, quietly, gently, without waves. Death by subtraction. "She'll ask questions," I said. "She won't," Amanda replied. "She's too busy thinking you're still in shock." That's her mistake. And it was. She mistook my stillness for paralysis. But in truth, I was already in motion, clean, quiet, precise. Like a bomb ticking under silk sheets. The last thing Amanda handed me was a sealed envelope. Inside, a list of contingency moves. Divorce filing locations in 3 states. All no fault. All favorable to me. All pre-vetted. "One last thing," she said, pausing before I stood. "If you want out, we can make this painless for the kids," she repeated. But not for her. There was a pause in me. Not hesitation. Calculation. "Let her feel everything she made me swallow," I said. Amanda didn't smile, but there was something like approval in her silence. When I stepped back into my car, I didn't feel rage. Rage was for amateurs. What I felt was structure. Clean lines. A floor plan for detachment. The countdown had started. She just didn't hear the ticking. But she would. It started like all poison does. Slow, invisible, and served in casual conversation. 2 Saturdays after the country club incident, she met her girlfriends for brunch. The usual crowd. Influencers in early menopause, women whose dogs had therapists, and one ex-real estate agent who now coaches women in confidence. Same place as always, same overpriced eggs, same fake laughter. But something felt off. Mira arrived late. Lip gloss perfect, sunglasses sharp, and, most damning of all, smiling like she knew something nobody else did. She didn't kiss cheeks, didn't compliment shoes. She just sat down and ordered black coffee. That was the first sign. Then came the question. "So, what exactly does your husband do again?" Lauren asked, tone soaked in nonchalance but sharpened like a shiv. My wife blinked. Fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" she said, feigning confusion. "I mean like, do?" Lauren clarified. "I realized I don't even know what he does all day. He's always around, but, like, in the background. Quiet. Kind of loaded." There were chuckles. Nervous ones. Another friend added, "Mira said you two had lunch last week." And that did it. A tiny fracture split across her smile. She hadn't known about that. Mira never told her. Mira, her friend, had been meeting with her husband. Alone. She tried to laugh it off, said something about Mira being a bleeding heart for strays, but it didn't land. Not when Mira just raised her cup and said, "He's sharper than you think. Way sharper." Then silence. Thick. Drowning. And for the first time in her curated, manicured, Instagram perfect life, my wife couldn't explain her husband. Because she didn't know me. Not really. She knew the schedule I kept, when I picked up the kids, when I ordered groceries, when I kissed her cheek goodnight. But the rest? The office she never visited. The LLC she never asked about. The trust accounts she assumed were mutual. She didn't even know which bank I used. And now, her friends were realizing that too. I became a question mark in their group thread. A variable. A man with no digital footprint, no ego, no slips. That kind of silence? It's not just suspicious. It's terrifying. Because men like that don't react. They design. That afternoon, she texted me. "Hey, you okay? You've been quiet lately." I replied 2 hours later. "Just thinking." She pressed again. "About what?" I left that one on read. Let her marinate. Later that night, she brought it up while folding laundry. "So apparently you've been having lunch with Mira now," she said, trying for casual. It sounded like someone balancing a smile over a minefield. I shrugged. She reached out. Figured it was polite to respond. "She's talking. People are asking questions." "That's new." I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought you liked when people talked." She didn't answer. She was starting to feel it now, that eerie vacuum where her control used to be. All the little things she used to take for granted, the side-eye jokes, the knowing looks from her friends, the unspoken status she clung to like air, all beginning to slip. And Mira? Mira was no longer orbiting her. She was orbiting me, which meant the center of gravity had shifted. And my wife, for the first time in years, was realizing she was no longer the sun. Just another fading star. The invitation came by email. Not text. Not group chat. Email. Subject line. Dinner at the Langfords, Friday 7 p.m. The name alone, the Langfords, was enough to make her pause. Because she hadn't hosted anything in months. Not since her last ladies' wine night, flopped when only 2 women showed up, and one of them left early to let the dog out. So when she clicked the email and saw my name signed at the bottom, Daniel Langford, her stomach curled. It was clean, direct. No smiley faces. No hope you can make it. Crap. Just an RSVP link. And a guest list. She scrolled. Scanned. Her own name wasn't even bolded. Just another line. And Darren? Omitted completely. Friday came fast. She took hours to get ready. Hair curled. Contour sharp. Perfume loud enough to claim airspace. She wore a navy dress she hadn't touched in years. One she used to say was for big nights. Tonight, she was reclaiming ground. Or trying to. The house had been cleaned professionally. She could tell. There were flowers, tasteful ones. Lighting dimmed to that perfect golden hour glow. Music humming low in the background. Not her usual overdone Pinterest aesthetic. Something more deliberate. She walked in like she owned it. Then froze. Mira was there. Already seated. Already laughing. With me. And not the polite, "I'm being supportive" kind of laugh. No, this was warm, natural. Familiar. She watched as I leaned in to whisper something, and Mira placed a hand on my arm like she'd done it before. Every woman in the room noticed. Dinner was plated, not served. Catered, but disguised to look homemade. I made small talk with everyone, poured wine, led with stories, business stories, not dad anecdotes. I talked about projects I'd quietly built, properties I'd bought, deals I'd passed on. They listened, really listened. One of her friends, Jenna, actually said, "Wow, I didn't know you were in real estate." I smiled. Not just real estate, but that's where I like to play. That line landed. I saw the shift in their faces. The man they'd once reduced to the kid wrangler now had presence, power. And she was silent, like background noise. She tried to inject herself a few times. A compliment here, a half-joke there. Nothing stuck. The room had tilted, and she wasn't the center anymore. She wasn't even on the map. She finally snapped when Mira mentioned our lunch again, casually, over dessert. "It's funny," Mira said. "I always assumed you were a numbers guy. But you're more like architecture. The way you think." My wife interrupted, sharp. "Well, I guess he's changed. He never used to be this visible." I turned to her slowly, held her gaze just long enough. "No," I said. "I've always been this way. You just never looked." The room fell quiet. Someone coughed. She laughed. Thin. Dry. "Well, forgive me for not realizing I married Gordon Gecko." I smiled politely. "That's all right. Not everyone's expected to keep up." Another pause. Then someone chuckled. Then another. Mira smirked into her glass. The table moved on. She didn't. After everyone left, she lingered in the hallway, heels in one hand, rage coiled behind her eyes. "You humiliated me," she hissed. "No," I said calmly, collecting glasses from the table. "You just saw yourself from the outside for once." She stood there like a statue in heels, silent, exposed, unsure. And as I rinsed the wine glasses and she disappeared upstairs without another word, I realized something. She wasn't scared because I'd changed. She was scared because I hadn't. She just finally noticed. I brought it up while we were driving back from a school recital. Our daughter's piano piece had gone off-key halfway through, and we were both still riding that fragile silence parents know all too well. She sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, staring out the window like the trees had insulted her. "I was thinking," I said, keeping my tone casual, "maybe we take a weekend. Just us." She turned her head slowly, like it was a test. "A weekend?" "Yeah, the Ridge. That place up in Vermont. Remember? I booked it years ago, just never used it." She blinked. "The Ridge? That spa place with the fire pits and that creepy glass library?" I nodded. "Same one. Still valid. They called to check if I wanted to renew the credit, and I figured, why not? No kids, no work, no noise. Just us. Maybe it's time we reconnect." She stared at me like she couldn't decide whether I was bluffing or broken. Then she smiled, small, confused, but real. "You're serious?" "I'm offering," I said. "Your call." She agreed before we even hit the next red light. The drive up was full of neutral pleasantries. She asked if I'd seen the new backsplash the neighbors installed. I asked if she'd finally gotten around to replacing her cracked phone screen. We didn't touch the deeper topics. That was by design. The Ridge was everything she remembered. Polished wood cabins, oversized throw blankets, gourmet meals that looked like Pinterest had sex with a French chef. We were greeted with lemon water and a staff that knew our names before we gave them. That was also by design. What she didn't know, and would never suspect, is that the Ridge was owned by a holding company. That holding company belonged to a client of mine, a quiet, well-dressed billionaire who owed me a favor and liked the idea of his retreat being used for, let's call it domestic clarification. She didn't notice the subtle things, like the fact that the concierge never asked for ID, or that the fireplace logs were already burning when we arrived, or that our cabin had no visible cameras, because the ones that mattered were in the walls, and ceiling, and above the bed. Every word we spoke, every moment we touched, every time she contradicted herself, it was all time-stamped, recorded, encrypted. I told Amanda I didn't want a messy divorce. I wanted a documented one. That weekend, I gave her every opportunity to speak honestly. I asked questions like, "Do you think we drifted, or was it always like this? Have you ever been tempted, even a little? If we wiped the slate clean, what would you actually want?" She answered like someone applying for a job she thought she already had. "No, never. I'd never do that. You've always been enough. I just got distracted." She cried once. At the spa. Said she felt like we were finally talking again. I held her hand across the dinner table. Let her laugh into her wine. Let her believe. She even initiated sex the second night. Slow, performative, like she was acting out a role she thought I wanted to see. I let her finish. Then I rolled over, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Thank you." She said she felt closer than we'd been in years. I said nothing. Because you don't interrupt a confession when the tape's still running. Sunday morning, before checkout, she curled up on the deck with a blanket, sipping espresso like a woman who had survived a storm. "This was exactly what we needed," she said. "Yeah," I replied, watching the steam rise from her cup. She had no idea what she'd given me. Every word, every inconsistency, captured. The false remorse. The passive blame shifting. The full-body lie of a woman who thinks comfort can erase consequence. She walked into that retreat hoping for a clean slate. And she was leaving with a signed confession, bound in metadata. We drove home in silence. Comfortable silence, she probably thought. But for me, it was the silence of a hunter zipping his bag shut. The plane leveled out somewhere above New Hampshire when I reached into my carry-on. She was mid-sentence, going on about how things felt different now, how she wanted to reframe the past few months as a rough chapter we'd survived together. She even used the phrase fresh start, said it like she'd invented it. I nodded, reached beneath my seat, and unzipped the compartment. Out came a slim black folder. Unmarked. Clean. I placed it gently on the tray between us like it was dessert she hadn't ordered. "What's this?" she asked, still smiling, like I was about to surprise her with a love letter. I didn't say anything. She opened it, and the smile died so quickly it looked like a switch had flipped behind her eyes. First page. A photo of her and Darren behind the pool house, his hand on her waist, her lips on his. Second, screenshots of messages, names she thought she'd deleted, coded texts, private DMs, time-stamped, cross-referenced. Third, the spreadsheet. Locations, dates, expenses, plane tickets that didn't match the stories. Restaurant bills she thought I never saw. Venmo receipts buried in the blur. She flipped faster now, breath quickening. Then came the final page. A single line, filing date, next Friday. Underneath it, a printed copy of the filing intake. No drama, just a form, with her full name, and the box ticked for irreconcilable misconduct. She didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then, "You're filing?" she whispered, her voice breaking like thin glass. "I am," I said, calm, almost polite. "I wanted you to see why." She looked around the cabin. Other passengers were reading magazines, watching movies, sipping seltzer. We were just another couple, flying home. Until she snapped. "You planned this," she shrieked, voice rising over the hum of the jet engines. "This whole weekend, it was a setup?" Heads turned. A flight attendant approached cautiously. "Ma'am, I'm gonna ask you to lower your voice." "No," she barked, standing up, jabbing a finger toward me. "He trapped me. He recorded everything. You've been waiting to do this." Passengers in row 17 started filming. She was spiraling now, wild-eyed, mascara smudged from sudden tears she didn't expect to need. She slapped the folder closed, tried to shove it back at me, but her hands shook too much. "You're sick," she hissed. "You're evil. Who even does this?" I looked up at her, then at the attendant beside us, now holding a hand radio and motioning discreetly toward the cockpit. "I'm going to need you to stay seated," the attendant said softly. "Let's all stay calm." My wife was trembling, face flushed. "This was your plan the whole time, wasn't it? You wanted me to break, to melt down in public like some crazy." I turned toward her fully and said the words like I was reciting a recipe. "You said I wasn't a real man," I said, just loud enough for the rows around us to hear. "You were right." I leaned in closer. Not threatening, not even angry, just final. "I'm something else." She stared at me, lips parted, and for once, no words came. The folder sat between us like a tombstone. The hum of the plane felt louder now, like it was amplifying her failure in stereo. She didn't cry. She didn't scream again. She just sat down, like someone who finally realized the ground had disappeared under them miles ago, and the fall had just started. And I buckled my seatbelt, reached for my coffee, and watched the clouds roll by like they had nothing to do with her collapse. Same restaurant. Different night. This time, the air was cooler, sharper. The kind of late autumn breeze that cuts through silk and sentiment alike. I waited inside just long enough to watch the laughter ripple across her new circle. Thin, brittle laughter that sounded rehearsed. Her friends sat around her, sipping cocktails they couldn't pronounce, dressed for social war. She looked good, calculatedly good. Hair curled just so, dress that hinted at modesty but knew better. They were gossiping about some friend's divorce. She laughed too loud, like someone trying to stay above water. Her smile was on autopilot. But when the black SUV rolled up again, same make, same engine hum, everything inside her paused. I stepped out from the shadows of the bar, straightened my sleeves, buttoned my coat. She saw me through the window and froze. Her friends looked too, confused at first, curious, then wide-eyed as they recognized the driver. Mira. She sat behind the wheel like she belonged there. Leather jacket, one hand on the steering wheel, sunglasses resting low on her nose even though the sun had dipped behind the buildings. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. I opened the passenger door. Wait. Daniel. My wife's voice cracked as she shoved her chair back, nearly knocking over a glass. She ran out of the restaurant like the building was on fire. Hair catching in the wind. Heels loud on the pavement. No more grace. No more performance. Just desperation. Please, she gasped. Please don't do this. They're all watching. They'll think I'm the... She cut herself off. Villain. I finished for her, one foot already in the car. I looked over my shoulder, into her tear-lined eyes. Her friends had followed her to the sidewalk now, standing in a neat little half-circle. Some whispered. One of them took out her phone. You told them I wasn't a real man, I said, voice calm. Not cruel, just absolute. Now they finally believe you. The door closed with the softest click I've ever heard. Final. Painless. Like shutting a file you'll never open again. Mira didn't say a word. Just shifted into gear. My wife stood there, mouth open, arms limp at her sides. She didn't scream this time. Didn't beg. She just watched. Watched as the SUV pulled away. As the taillights grew smaller. As Myra's profile caught the glow of passing street lamps and made her look untouchable. And then she turned around. Her friends weren't laughing anymore. They weren't asking questions. They were just looking at her like they finally understood the punchline, and it wasn't funny. She stood there, abandoned by the narrative she'd written. And for the first time in her life, there was no stage. No applause. Just silence. And the sound of her own story, ending.